The interesting thing is that that is placed into the facade, this relationship between nature and architecture that is somehow a confrontation between artificial and natural. If you look above, you will see another wonderful example of a perspective technique, and people are standing in lines just to see the ceiling in the mirror. Not far away from Pantheon, we have a really special church that is the only one Gothic church from those times. In this church, Inquisition accused Galileo and he renounced from his beliefs. So the Catholic Church decided to make a new order to spread the education, and Jesuits were exactly those guys. But how is it so that this statue is the only one survived bronze statue of the Roman Emperor? It is truly a line between the new Baroque Rome and old ancient Rome. Pantheon, one of the most important things you must see in Rome. Okay, let me give you some history. It was built in 126 AD, and the name says Mark Agrippa built this in the 3rd year of his consulate. That was a temple for all pagan gods. So when the Christianity overtook the power here, they wanted, of course, to destroy this place. But what saved the Pantheon is the fact that they decided to make this temple a Catholic church. This structure was such a wonderful example of Roman engineering that many architects wanted to repeat this. And yes, during the Renaissance period, they wanted to surpass the dome of the Pantheon. And they almost did this in the Cathedral of Florence. But they couldn't do it fully because the recipe of Roman concrete was lost in Roman times. And this hole in dome is called oculus, and that is the only source of light. And you probably know that Raphael's tomb is also located here. Many people will agree that Pantheon is the oldest thing in the square, but that is actually not right, because we have this obelisk, and it is right from Egypt. It is done during the rulage of Ramses II, that is somewhere 8th century before the Christ birth. They have lots of those obelisks around the Rome, so that is not something special. On the other hand, I believe that is a nice story to know. Not far away from Pantheon, we have a really special church that is the only one Gothic church from those times. Basically, all the Rome went Baroque, but this exact church stayed in Gothic style until now. It is not visible now. We have a Renaissance facade, but we'll go inside and you will see this Gothic influence. In this church, Inquisition accused Galileo and he renounced from his beliefs. Then he was kind of imprisoned in his house in Florence. We will have another character who did not renounce from his beliefs, and that's why he was crucially killed. That is really interesting. There is a thing where you insert money and then it will give you light in this room, for example. We have timer here. So basically, if you want to look to all those rooms in the church, you have to insert lots of money. I think that's a nice business idea, really. And now the famous Trevi fountain. Let us find out why is this so popular. The interesting thing is that is placed into the facade. This relationship between nature and architecture, which we talked about previously, is also really good visible here. There is somehow a confrontation between artificial and natural. It was done in 18th century by Nicola Salvi. But as for me, this fountain is of course highly overrated. You cannot go through. They have just too much of tourists. I believe that is so popular because of the cinema. But I do know that cinema, I'm too young for that, and basically for me this fountain was just an interesting example of this kind of nice combination between natural and artificial. This church is called, I'll read this on Italian, so don't blame me, Chiesa di Sant'Ignazio di Loyola. And Ignazio Loyola was a founder of two famous things. He is the author of the famous phrase, "The end justifies the means." And also he is a founder of Jesuits order. This phrase, "the end justifies the means," is basically about spreading Christianity. That is not about something bad, but we know how Catholic Church spread the Christianity. The Jesuits order he founded has some interesting purpose. First of all, when the church divided itself into Catholic and Protestant, the Protestant church wanted to educate the simple people. And for this reason, obviously, the Protestant church will be much more popular compared to Catholic church. So the Catholic church decided to make a new order to spread the education, and Jesuits were exactly those guys. But the church is also worth seeing because that is one of the first Baroque churches in Rome. It is also popular among the tourists because they have an interesting exhibitions of perspective. During the construction they ran out of money, so the building of dome was kind of a problem. Then they decided to hire a painter to decorate this as a dome. So when you go inside with a good light, you can really think that there is a dome. If you look above, you will see another wonderful example of a perspective technique, and people are standing in lines just to see the ceiling in the mirror, which I don't recommend to you. Don't waste your time on this. Near this church you can also find a former temple of Hadrian. You have to walk a bit, but you will surely find this. And that is a pretty interesting example. How can you place ruins, old Roman ruins, in modern facade? I'm not sure what exact modern building that was, but the idea of this, of implementing ancient Roman ruins into modern facade is really common in Rome for obvious reasons. And the famous Capitoline Hill, the most important hill among other 7 hills Rome is built on. Here was always the Roman government, and even now it is here. But when the Roman Empire fell in the Middle Ages, this place went really poor. But at Renaissance period they decided that is not the most representative view, and then they hired Michelangelo to design all those buildings around the statue. This statue is actually the only one survived bronze statue of Roman emperor. It is Mark Aurelius. Cool thing is that statue is actually without stirrups because they were not invented back then. But how is it so that this statue is the only one survived bronze statue of the Roman emperor? Here's a nice story. During the Christianization, they decided they have to remove all bronze statues of the Roman emperors. But they thought that that one is a statue of Constantine, and Constantine was an emperor who popularized Christianity, so they decided to leave him here. But like I said, that was not Constantine, it was Marcus Aurelius. But that is nice that they left the statue. Here is a construction site, which is pretty normal to Rome, so you can't really see the Michelangelo's work. On the other hand, this building in the middle, the main building, is Administration of Justice in Rome. That is a building from 13th to 14th century. And not only this building, but all the place, all Capitol and Hill, it all is a line between the old Rome and new one. Because behind the Capitol and wall, you'll have Roman forums and Roman ruins. It is truly a line between the new Baroque Rome and old ancient Rome, which I believe is pretty romantic.